So as I'm out and about looking at God's creation, I always think about the history of creation as to, what happened, why it happened. We understand that evil came, how it came, when it came, why it came. All these are questions that are actually, there's only one place in this entire world where we find those answers, and that's in the Bible. Now, most people, they'll say, no, 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 but that's okay. Let everybody believe what they want to believe. That's what I believe, okay? That I have found those answers. Now, one of these answers is about the story of Satan. And as I've been covering in my history videos that I've been doing on my Zoom calls on the weekends, we've been studying the book of Genesis, and we just had 2 sessions just on the first 2 verses of scripture alone on, verse 1 and verse 2. And it's just so much information in there because that covers a period of time of some possibly millions and billions of years, so you can't just do it in a few moments. So basically, the analysis we did was that between Genesis chapter 1 and verse 2, there are at least 3 ages of time. One is, of course, the beginning age, which you could call is the age of God. That is the age of the Creator. Now, of course, all these ages are the ages of the Creator because he has created all things for himself and to serve his purposes, as we are told in the Bible. But the other subsequent ages that have come from then until now, after the beginning of creation, which begins with this place called heaven, which is the city of God, okay? It's the city of God, and then, just a second, there you go. It's the city of God from which God rules and reigns. The creation begins with the creation of the city of heaven. And after that, he created some inhabitants in heaven, intelligent beings, and other, I'm sure beasts as well. But one thing I would like to say is that all of God's creation may have some intelligence in it in various, varying degrees. And Jesus said, even the stones can cry out or the trees can clap their hands. So, so in that respect, every living thing, every created thing has some sort of information in it, okay? Let's leave it at that. But out of that, we have 2 intelligent creatures, intelligent being people that can, or creatures that can speak and talk and process information in terms of language. They have data processing capabilities. Those are the angels and men, okay? So right in heaven itself, God created angels, and then the races of angels is many. And then he created these races of man-like beings. They're not exactly mankind like us, but they're very similar to us. They're called the sons of God. Sons of God were flesh, angels are spirit. And no, I'm not going to go into arguments that the sons of God are angels, as that I've already discussed in many, 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 many videos, so I'll leave it at that. Okay, and then after he created the sons of God, who were corporeal, for corporeal creatures need a terrestrial body to dwell on, and not a celestial body like the city of heaven or even the heavens above us, okay? They need a terrestrial body. Look behind me there. See mountains, waters, trees, grasses, etc. This is a terrestrial world. Okay, terrestrial world, and in this terrestrial world, it is designed and created for terrestrial creatures, okay? And therefore, this was never meant for man or for angels, for spirit creatures. So this was always meant for corporeal inhabitants. Corporeal means creatures of flesh that have a body. And those first, long before our race, which is the race of man or the race of Adam, came into existence, there existed these sons of God who are also flesh, and they were the first inhabitants of the earth. So this is the first age of creation. It's the age of creation. It's the age of God, in which he created the heaven, he created the earth, and he stretched out the heavens. I don't know if you can see that behind me there when the light shines on the camera, the sun is shining behind me. So these are heavenly bodies. So he created all that. Okay, not all together, in sequence. First the heaven, then the inhabitants, the angels, sons of God, then the earth, and then these heavenly bodies. That's what the Bible teaches, okay? And so after some point in time, maybe thousands, tens of thousands, millions of years later, something happened that these creatures some of them started to turn into evil, okay? Be led by this person called the anointed cherub, whose story is told in Ezekiel 38. So thus begins the second age of creation, which you could call it is the age of the evil of the angels. Not all angels, but the angels that sinned against God. Okay, so that's the second age. At some point in time, after the second age came to an end, in this second age, the angels were not only the evil creatures, some of these sons of God, who later came to be known as the gods of the people of mythology, like Zeus and Apollo and Poseidon in Greece, or Thor and Odin in the Norse countries, or Rama and Krishna and Vishnu and Shiva in India and in the Chinese cultures, So some of these sons of God who are very much corporeal, flesh creatures of flesh, they were later worshipped as God. So that beginning of evil began with the angels, but later is spread from above in the heavenly realms down to the earth. And some of these sons of God who had built some magnificent, fantastic worlds from which we get some of these myths and legends of places like Atlantis, they began to turn to evil themselves, okay? So these sons of God, like who became the gods of mythology, like Zeus, for example, later on, they were partnering with the angels in this second age of creation, which is the first stage of evil. So it is the age of the evil of the angels and of some of these sons of God. At some point in time in that age, which could have lasted, I have no idea, much longer than the age of man here in this present time, okay? So they were, spreading evil throughout the heavens and on the earth, primarily through the creation of money. Okay, buying and selling and merchandising and trading, like you see in the Star Wars movies. The story of Star Wars is a fictionalized form of this real story of this evil of the angels who were first responsible for creation of money and merchant banking and buying and selling. So Star Wars actually begins with trade wars. Okay, people don't know that. That's the background to these Star Wars, as they're called. And star being symbolic of angels, it calls, you could say angel wars, and these things that did happen in the past. And these wars that actually occurred eventually involved these angels fighting these sons of God, okay? And these sons of God, the most famous of these sons of God in the Bible, in Greek mythology, it would be somebody like Zeus. In Hindi mythology, it would be somebody like Shiva. In Norse mythology, it could be like an Odin. But in the Bible, it is Lucifer. Okay? Now, Lucifer himself may not necessarily have been directly involved in these wars, or he might have been. Okay? That we do not know. I'm just piecing this story together from the Bible. There's some speculation in it, okay? But it's reasoned speculation. So after these wars, these angels were defeated and they were locked away in this place called hell. So it is obvious that hell itself, which God, when he began his creation and everything was wonderful and perfect, hell was not a place that he created. But at some point in time, what we're looking at this earth here, okay, you can see under my feet, there exist worlds. In those mountains, there are probably some creatures that inhabit it to this very day, okay? And they are inhabited by far greater number of creatures than we have on the surface. Most of the living beings on this earth, they're not on the surface. They are in these waters. Last, when I posted that video just now about the cryptids, there's this myth of this Ogopogo monster, which is like the Loch Ness monster that lives in this lake. These stories are everywhere because these creatures exist, okay? So they exist, when these creatures came into existence and these worlds that they built underground, the earth is like a building, okay? Like when you go to a downtown area in a city, you'll see a high-rise building which may have 10, 20, 50 stories. That's how the earth is. The earth has stories. There are stories inside the earth. There are also stories in the heavens, the Bible tells us, okay? And each one of these stories is maybe accessible from the story below and the one above, or it may not be. They are all self-contained parts to which are inhabited, okay? Inhabited by different creatures, even maybe by giants and trolls. And this story here in these mountains of the Sasquatch, Bigfoot, etc. Just getting a little sidetracked. But all that happened in these ages that came before the age of man. All in that time, okay? So the angels were defeated. They were cast down. They were locked away in hell. Of course, all of this happening to serve God's purpose because God needed evil to come into existence and evil to become and grow till it became absolute. And it became absolute in Satan. Satan is a creature that, in my opinion, was not created by God, but he was created, manufactured, factory, laboratory, genetic, whatever, however, manipulation they did in these ages that came before in the age of evil. These angels and probably these sons of God, these Luciferians, they worked together to create these many races of these creatures that were like weaponry. Okay, and we see this here even in movies and shows, like in Battlestar Galactica, which is a very famous show. And they had these machines, which it turns out that they were actually living machines. They were organic. Okay, they were what we call organic creatures. So this idea that organic machines like Satan, who was a serpentine dragon, which is kind of like that lake Ogopogo monster behind me here, that they have existed or they can be created, is not far-fetched. Okay, because the Bible tells us that these people invent evil things all the time, and you can have evil creatures, evil machines, because Satan is like a machine. Okay, he does not have he is not like a person. Okay, he is purely evil, and he is like a robotic machine who only knows how to do evil, like we see in some of these movies again. So they were manufactured in that time to be used as weapons, because these wars that these angels eventually fought with between themselves, between the sons of God, they were also involved. Of course, their goal was not anything to do with coming down to earth and having sex with them, a stupid story. It was that they wanted to ascend up into heaven, go there and conquer the throne of God. So they were creating all these machines, some of them living, like these reptilians, these serpentine dragons, which are like, could be gigantic in size with great deal of firepower. Dragons, they breathe fire, right? And we read about this also in the book of Revelation, the fire comes out of their mouth. I would like to interject here and read to you from Revelation chapter 9, beginning verse 17. And it says, "Thus I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them, having breastplates of fire and of jacinth and brimstone. And the heads of the horses were as heads of lions, and out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. By these three was the third part of men killed by the fire and by the smoke and by the brimstone which issued out of their mouths." So, the idea that there can be organic or creatures that are weapons that can kill and destroy, it is definitely in the Bible. So, whether like just because we don't see dragons flying around, blowing places up like they showed with fire, like they show in those shows like Game of Thrones, etc., that doesn't mean that they did not exist, or they may not still exist. And then we can read in Numbers 21:6, "And the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and much people of Israel died." Okay, again, people say, okay, this is just like poisonous snakes. But the expression fiery, it always implies something to do with fire. And then again, you can read in Isaiah 14:29, "Rejoice not thou, whole Palestina, because the rod of him that smote thee is broken. For out of the serpent's root shall come forth a cockatrice, and his fruit shall be a fiery flying serpent." One of the major gods of the Mesoamericans is Quetzalcoatl, who is a plumed or a feathered flying serpent, okay, which is more or less like a serpentine dragon that breathes fire. So again, these are stories in mythology, but they're also, in the Bible. And we always try to explain them away in terms of the natural beasts or the natural world that we are acquainted with. But this world, we know very, very little about what exists on it in the present, let alone that which has existed upon it in the past. Okay, so that's fire, that's weaponry. So they were created as weapons to destroy. I speculate that the reptilian dragon race, serpentine dragon race, whose head is Satan, was created by the evil angels and perhaps by the evil sons of God together, led by the anointed cherub for the angels and Lucifer for the sons of God. And they created these dragons as weapons. In this world, all the information that exists is always based on some truth. The only one that can create original information is God. Everyone else can only take information and that comes from God and either believe it and understand it the way it should be, or it can be twisted and a lie can be created out of that truth. And this is what fiction in mythology, in science fiction, in fantasy fiction, there is a great deal of information that is, all of it, I would say, is based on some truths, which relate mostly to the history of the ages of evil that have come and gone. For example, in the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote the Lord of the Rings books, for example, he also wrote another work, which is a very extensive, it's like an encyclopedia kind of thing. It's about the history of creation, really going back right to the very beginning. And in all of fiction, all fantasy fiction, all mythologies, this is the only work that I've found that actually goes right back to the beginning, to God. Okay, all like Greek mythology, Hindu mythology, and such, they all begin in the middle. After evil had started, they begin in chaos. But chaos came into a perfect creation as a result of the birth of evil. So they leave that whole history out. But in Tolkien's work, he begins at the beginning and he talks about these angelic beings, which he admits were based on, the biblical angels. The God that he had in his work is based on the biblical God. So he admits that his story has a great parallels with the Bible. But anyways, to cut this short, in that work, the Silmarillion is called, he tells us that it was this very high angel who turned to evil and darkness. He created the dragons. So you can read here, Glaurung was the first terrestrial fire-breathing dragon in Middle-earth, bred by Morgoth. Morgoth, or Melkor as he's also known, is this angel who's patterned after the anointed cherub of Ezekiel 28. They're bred by Morgoth himself in the depths of Angband, depths inside the earth. He was known as the father of dragons and possibly was the progenitor of the dragons. And why did he create this dragon? It was created as weapons, okay? They did have consciousness. These creatures, like I said, they are living organic machines who can process information, they can think, okay? But all his conscience, not his consciousness, is only directed by evil because Melkor, this evil angel, he poured all of his evil into this dragon, we are told in the story of Tolkien. So again, is that based on some reality that it is this anointed cherub who may actually have created Satan in the beginning and created him to be evil and to be a destructive weapon in his war against God? Who knows? But it sounds reasonable to me. On my first YouTube channel, which YouTube deleted or terminated, as they called it, without any justification a few years ago, I did have a couple of videos, at least 2, maybe 3, on the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, especially he works in the Silmarillion as related to the history of creation as he wrote in it. And there are so many parallels to it in the Bible that everybody thinks that this work is based on Norse mythology or Celtic mythology or something. It is not. It is based strictly on the Bible. His story begins with God, whom he calls the Luvatar, and he admits that it was based on the Abrahamic God, as he calls it, which is the God of the Bible, Jehovah. Okay, and then he begins with these angels. These angels begin, The creation begins with these him creating these angels, not even angels like these cherubim, like very high order of angelic beings, okay, whom he called the Ainur, and they sing. And what do we read in Job 38:7? When the morning stars sang together at the beginning of creation as the earth was being founded. So again, like those stories, they don't just pop into a person's head out of nowhere. They are definitely based on some reality and some truth. And then the highest of these angels in his story, this one called Melkor, he turns and becomes evil. Okay. He introduces discord in God's creation. Okay. And what do we read in Ezekiel 28 about the anointed cherub? Iniquity was found in him. Again, parallels, okay? And then he trains. And then in this story, the men, okay, in Silmarillion, he calls, there are going to be two species that are be called the children of Iluvatar, or the children of God. One are going to be the elves, who are very much like mankind, but they are not men. They're different, but they are like men, except they are superior in their physiology and their knowledge, etc. So they are superior, and they came first. And what do we read in the Bible? That these sons of God, who are men or man-like, they came first. Okay, and they inhabited the earth first, just like these elves did in his story. And then the men came at a much later time. And what do we read now? What are we studying here now? That all these ages went by, in which they had these angels, some of whom rebelled against God, and they started all these evil, practices in creation, including the use of money, and also that of idolatry, of worshiping the creature instead of the creator. And then, some of these flesh and blood corporeal beings called the sons of God, upon whom the elves of Tolkien are patterned. They also joined in the evils of these angels, and eventually they ended up fighting each other, but they did. And these elves, as we read even in the works of Tolkien, some of them did, partner with this Melkor, this evil angel, and then they went about to do all kinds of evil experimentation. Some of these they were twisted. They were some of these elves. They were genetically modified, twisted, and they became what's called orcs. And then some of them became goblins. So all these stories in it, but all these creatures that are being produced and manufactured through all this experimentation that is going on here in the earth and inside the earth. So the story of the inside of the earth, these worlds that have come to exist inside of the earth, because the Bible tells us the things which I read to you from Revelation, things that are in the earth, inside the earth. Okay, so things we're referring to living, intelligent creatures. As Mary said to the angel said to Mary when he came to prophesy to her that she would she would be, give birth to the Messiah, whose name would be Jesus. He said, the holy thing that shall be born. So that the word thing in the King James Bible, it refers to living, intelligent creatures. So these are things that are inside the earth. And that is where these evil angels, they created this race of dragons to be their weaponry in their wars with the other angels, with God. With the history is just too vast and it's too far away from us right now to be able to piece it all together. But we can get a panoramic view, but we are not close enough to it to be able to work out all the details. So this information that I'm giving you of the history of the ages, I know that these ages of time can be divided since the beginning of creation into these certain segments, okay? But what exactly happened in those? How exactly did these angels, what evil did they do? Or what did these sons of God do? And then later on, what did the serpentine dragons, these Nagas do? I don't know the exact details, but these things did happen. And ultimately, God, of course, none of this was a surprise to him. He had known that this was going to happen. He needed it to happen because evil serves a purpose for God, which I have covered in many of my videos. You can go and watch them. Why evil? Okay. So they eventually, evil turns against each other. So in the beginning, these sons of God and these angels were partners, and eventually they turned upon each other. And same thing with these machines, these evil creatures that they created, these satanic creatures, and Satan himself, who is the head of all those, okay, the head dragon, and which is the most powerful machine, because I would like to call him a machine, okay, a living machine, an organic machine, whatever you want to call him. But he had, what he operated on was evil. His operations were only controlled by evil. Where did that evil come into him from? Because we are told that he was the murderer from the beginning. And obviously, God didn't create anybody that was a murderer from the beginning. That evil beside him came from the evil of the angels and of those Luciferian sons of God. All that evil that they had inside them, the malice, the wickedness, the sinfulness, it was all inputted into this race of this dragon serpents. Okay. The story of the serpent is what I want to try to get to, because this age, which I divided in my previous videos, I've always said that there was the age of creation, the age of the angels, and the age of these Luciferian sons of God led by Lucifer. And then Satan is only become active in this age. That I'm going to revise that. And this is what the Bible talks about: meditation, about thinking about scripture, thinking about, your mind going all the time. I've been studying this topic for 30 years, and only now, as I'm doing this teaching, do I come to understand that the age that ended right before Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, where it tells us that the earth was without form and void. That means it was a ruined wasteland, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. What I learned from it is that I have always said that flood that occurred at that time was caused by Lucifer. It's generally even taught as Lucifer's flood. However, I'm going to revise that now, because there is something that we have an evidence of so much across the world, which is the evidence of serpent worship, of Satan worship. It doesn't begin at this time. The serpent has existed on this earth for a very long time, and his temples, they are found all over the earth. This idea came to me when I was listening to this podcast by an Indian man, who was being interviewed. His name is Praveen Mohan. I'll put a link in the description. He's like an Indian Indiana Jones. Okay, so he goes around India and around the world, especially Indian temples. And when he was talking, he said something which really, my mind just went, wow, this makes so much sense. He said that what's common in all cultures across the world, the most common symbol that is found everywhere in all of the temples, whether they are in Peru or in South America, in Colombia, Mexico, or even in North America, in Europe, in Asia, it is the serpent. That these temples that are in India, some of which are impossible, that they could have been built even in the time of Noah, they predate that. What you see in there is serpents everywhere. So then I came to understand, okay, that this age, this flood, is not the flood of Lucifer, it is the flood of Satan. Okay? What happened in that second age of evil, the first one being the age of the angels, they are cast down, they're locked away. Begins the second, the sons of God take over. They are the head honchos of evil now. And they have this Satan and his serpent creatures. And serpent we think of as snakes. That is not. You want to really look what a serpentine creature looks like. You should watch that show called Babylon 5. And that there is this creature called Shakar or something. I forget his name. That is a serpent man, you could call. In India, there are stories of the Nagas. The Nagas are serpent people. And this is what this Praveen Mohan was talking about the Nagas, the serpent people. That's about this talk about the serpents came about. And he said, yeah, that's what's common across the world is the serpent. And I said, Yes, that makes sense because the age that ended, the previous age, it ended with the destruction of Satan, at least as a bodily creature, as a corporeal creature, because he did exist as a living organic creature, whether you want to call it a machine or a creature, it doesn't matter. But just like in the first age of evil into the second, the angels were cast down and then Lucifer took over. So this age, the second age of evil, which is called the Bronze Age, which was the age of these evil sons of God, it does not end with the casting down of Lucifer. Oh, how art thou fallen, O Lucifer, son of the morning. Okay, very famous passage from Isaiah 14. I always thought that Lucifer, as he was ascending up into heaven, he was thrown down, he kind of broke the firmament, the flood came, and all that happened in his time. But no, the Bible doesn't say that. The Bible says nothing about a flood at the time of Lucifer. The Bible talks about Lucifer being cast down and thrown into the pit. Okay, no flood, nothing like that. Okay, that he is being judged. So then it clicked. Okay. So just as the angels gave place to Lucifer, Lucifer gave place to Satan before that evil world came to an end. Anyhow, so what I was saying was that there are actually three distinct ages of evil before the time of Adam, and this modern age, which we can call the age of man. Okay, although the sons of God are very much creatures like man, as we also read in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4 and verse 2, that they were attracted physically to women and they were able to have relations with them, even produce offspring, which, by the way, the Bible tells us they were men, says nothing about them being Nephilim or anything like that. Okay, that some of these evil sons of God, their judgment came before the judgment of Satan. So all three fathers of evil, three ages of evil, three fathers of evil, and they were all judged prior to the creation of man, prior to God making Adam and Eve and putting them in the Garden of Eden, in which there was a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So this knowledge, this book of evil, had to be fully written. And it was written to these three fathers of evil. One was the the race of angels led by the anointed cherub. The other one was the races of these sons of God, whose most famous, whose face is Lucifer. And lastly is this age of beasts, you could say, these reptilian serpentine beasts, and they are represented by Satan. Okay, so the time just prior to Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, in which this entire earth up into the heavens is covered with water. There is complete darkness. That beautiful sun that's shining here today wasn't in the sky. Okay, darkness was covering all. Darkness being symbolic of evil, it tells us that darkness had now become absolute, and that's, my friends, is Satan. Okay, neither the anointed cherub nor Lucifer were absolutely evil. Okay, they were not complete darkness. God had to wait until full darkness had come before he was going to make man, because that darkness was going to be very necessary and useful for him. So this story of the previous age is divided after the age of creation, when evil entered, decay and deterioration and entropy enters creation. That part can be divided, that complete age of evil before man can be divided into three ages: one of the angels, one of the sons of God, and one of these reptilian serpents. So we have these temples, okay? They are built all over the world, wherever you go, and especially in India. And many of these temples in India, they are, something to behold. For example, what you're looking at is a picture of the Kailasa temple, and this is what we read about it. Formed from a single block of excavated stone, Kailasa temple is considered one of the most impressive cave temples in India. The enormous structure is one of 34 cave temples and monasteries that are collectively known as the Ellora Caves. The cave located in the western region of Maharashtra, the caves are a UNESCO World Heritage Site and include monuments dating between 600 and 1000 BC, 1000 AD. While there are many impressive structures on site, it is the megalithic Galasa temple that is perhaps the most well-known. Renowned both for its size and impressive ornamentation, it is not entirely clear who had the Galasa temple built. Well, yes, it is like basically carved downwards. It has not been built from the ground up. It is like taking a mountain, like a huge rock of a mountain, and cutting into the mountain to build this. And who God only knows how deep it might go actually, or how many more caves there might be here that are, with this kind of structure. It is impossible to build even today. This is one of those temples and structures that I am sure was built in the age before Adam, and it was most likely built by this Naga race of these serpent people, whose leader is Satan, who was the third chief evildoer in God's creation since evil entered into creation. Because of the artwork that is in them, the size and dimensions of these places, they could not possibly have been made by anybody from the race of Adam. They were not built in these modern times, okay? So this race of angels these temples were built by the reptilian serpents, the Naga people, who actually ruled this earth just prior to the time of this great flood, which covered the earth and went up into the heavens, destroyed the heavens that existed at that time. Sorry, almost dropped this here, and brought this darkness. And God's Spirit is hovering over that darkness, and God is surveying the damage, and he's saying, okay, now the time is right. Now I'm going to make the creature, which is going to be the apple of my eye, that creature upon whom I'm going to shower all my love, okay? That's time has now come, because darkness is full. The iniquity, evil is reached its completeness that I needed it to do. Evil being the opposite of good, Satan being an opposer, the opposite of God. God's opposite had now come into existence. God is light, darkness had now come into existence. So God was going to place man in between the middle of the light and the darkness, in between good and evil, in between life and death. Death had already come, which was the most important thing. Death had to exist before man was made. So God said, now I'm going to place man in the middle between these two, and then I'm going to teach him both. I'm going to teach him life because he will understand death. I'm going to teach him good because he will understand evil by doing evil. He will understand light because he has now seen darkness. When darkness came, God is light, so light has always existed and will always exist. But his creatures did not have the knowledge of light because they hadn't seen darkness yet. So when darkness came, now the knowledge of light it became possible to share with man the knowledge of light. Okay, that's what happened. See, scientists study light in darkness, okay? So darkness, without darkness, you cannot study or understand light. This is explained to us as to the reason why this darkness, which was found in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, where we are told that darkness was upon the face of the deep. It tells us in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 6, as to why this darkness came. For God, who commanded the light to shine out of darkness, has shined in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. Essentially, what it is telling us that just as the light, when it's shone out of the darkness, suddenly, all his creatures understood light. That arrival of that light began the process of making it possible for God's creatures to begin to understand their creator. They had seen night, they had seen darkness, now they saw his light and they said, yes, light is good. Now they had seen death and destruction, they saw his life and they said, yes, life is good. They had been oppressed, they had been cruelly handled by all these evildoers, all three of them, the chiefs, the angels, the sons of God, these reptilian beasts, these Naga people. And then God showered them with his love, and they came to know the love is the greatest power of all. And all this had to happen. That is the reason why this darkness and this evil had to exist. And it had to exist before man was made. Therefore, all these ages, they came before God said, let there be light in Genesis chapter 1:3. Therefore, all these ages of creation, the beginning of creation, which I believe, it always takes longer to create something than to destroy it. Okay, destruction can be very quick. Therefore, I believe the building ages of creation, the building of God's own city, the city of heaven, then the founding of the earth and the heavenly bodies, I think all that, and then to be inhabited by the celestial beings, the angelic races in the heavens, and by these sons of God and their races upon the earth. This must have taken a very, 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 very long time. That's why even in mythology, like the Hindus or the Greeks, when they divide time into ages, they always say, like the Greeks, for example, tell us there was the golden age, the silver age, the bronze age, the iron age. And in those, you'll look at the screen, you can see that on the diagram, the golden age is always the longest one, because that was the age of creation. But once that creation had been reached a certain limit that God has set for it, then evil entered in, and then began the process of decay, of destruction and corruption to bring us to Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, where darkness had now come and covered the earth. And now it became possible for God to say, let there be light. And then we could begin to understand, to gain the knowledge of God. For God, who commanded the light to shine out of darkness, has shined in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of God could not be given to his creatures until darkness came. Now I hope you understand a little bit why evil and darkness had to exist in God's creation, and why death had to come, because death is how, by dying, is how God proved and demonstrated his love for man, so that man could now understand that his creator loves him and his creator is love, and therefore he can turn around and love his creator back, so they can both have a great relationship of love with each other. Yeah, this is the greatest love story ever written, and it is all true. All right, so that's what the story is, that all these temples, this world whose ruins are still existing today, is not even necessarily now. When we talk about these serpent people, these Naga people, the world that they had in that day, in the age before Adam, that built these massive temples, and they worshiped everywhere on this earth. They are not the only inhabitants. There were still some of these sons of God and everything, all creatures that existed, that coexisted with them. There were giants that coexisted with them. So they were all coexisting in a very sci-fi-like world, okay? There are these hybrids. There's all kinds of creatures that existed. The chief of those were the serpents. They became the chief. Because even in India, like a god like Shiva was very much a humanoid. He always has these serpents wrapped around his head. Always Vishnu, whatever, they're always Brahma, they're always found in the presence of serpents. So basically, this serpent had then taken over the baton of evil from Lucifer, who had taken it over from the angels. From the angels, it passed to Lucifer, it passed to Satan in the age before Adam. And when this evil had reached the depths, sunk to the depths that God needed it to be, so that God could say this is absolute now, that's when the judgment of that world came. okay, whose ruins we see up until this day. A lot of those temples, they still exist in India, for example, and they are filled with these imagery in Cambodia. In Cambodia, they have this legend that the first king, or actually was a queen, or maybe a transvestite or something, that it was a serpent. It was a Naga person, okay? In some of these temples in India, they have these imagery of these serpent people, serpents coming out of the earth and then transforming into something kind of, you know, people, shape-shifting, okay? All this is not fiction, this is all real. But the point is that that age that ended, the age of evil, it ended with the serpents, with Satan. That's why the serpent imagery is everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. So when the end of that age came and God decided to judge it, he then destroyed these creatures, these machines, whatever they were, whatever their composition is, you know, he destroyed them. About 20 or so years ago, I was in the Caribbean and I saw one of these manta rays, and not one, I saw a few of them, and also saw a lot of other marine life like sharks and, you know, swordfish and such. And when I saw these, I was really, really, you know, intrigued. And I just, you know, could sit there and watch for hours. And then it was that time I came to realize that this was a machine. This is somebody has created this, manufactured this, you know, designed this, that this is not, you know, what people would think of just like a natural beast. Okay, and that's these aircraft and everything, they're patterned after these because these are machines themselves. And that's when I came to the realization that everyone's body is a machine. Our body is a machine. It's not the body that really matters or its shape. It is what is inside that body. And inside that body, like ours, God puts a consciousness. He gives us a mind so we can, you know, think thoughts, we can process information. So when I call Satan a machine, or these reptilians, these Nagas and such, that they were manufactured or created at some point in time, you know, it's not that far-fetched an idea. But what is really important is what sort of knowledge or what was the person that was downloaded into these machines. Okay, nowadays, we hear a lot about AI. And, you know, we hear a lot of these stories like in the Terminator movies, et cetera, that AI is going to become, you know, self-aware. And these are all stories that are based on some real history that has happened in the past. So one of these stories is, of course, of the serpent dragon races led by Satan, that they were created by this anointed cherub, by the races of angels, maybe with the assistance of these sons of God, mankind, like people that existed back then. And they inputted, they downloaded, just like into a computer, we can download knowledge and information into these creatures. You know, a lot of knowledge about the physical world and such things does downloaded, but more importantly, they were also given a psychology, some sort of mind and artificial intelligence. And in that mind or in that person that they put into these creatures, it was the person of the evil of those angels and those Luciferian sons of God, the evil ones. So in that respect, these reptilians, serpent, nagas, whatever, you know, these serpent dragons, Satan, he is a composite. He is a composite of all of the evil of the angels and that of these evil sons of God. So in him, these angels, like people talk about fallen angels all the time, evil angels, okay? So yes, in that respect, I believe that they continue to exist through Satan because their evil and their knowledge and their understanding, at least a lot of it, was inputted into Satan artificially. How it was done, I have no idea. And also of these sons of God. So like I said, he is both these fallen angels. I don't like to use the word fallen, but the evil angels, especially the anointed cherub, and these evil Luciferian sons of God. So he has the evil, both of the angels and of the sons of God. And that's why he is purely evil. In him, evil has been perfected. He is absolute evil. He is absolute darkness. He is absolute death. He is absolutely the exact opposite of everything that God is. So now, hopefully, we can understand that ages of time in the Bible can be divided into two major divisions, and the second division has three subdivisions within itself. The first age can be called the age of creation, the age of God. Not that any of the other ages are not the ages of God, because everything God says He's created all things by Himself and for Himself. Okay, so all these evil creatures that have existed, they also have served God's purposes, and that is the only reason for their existence. So number one is the age of God, the golden age, and this is the age of creation, the age of building, forming, and shaping the cosmos and filling it with living creatures, with celestial angelic races in the heavenly and celestial realms, and terrestrial man-like corporeal creatures called the sons of God, for whom their abode and dwelling was on the earth. Okay. Earth is terrestrial body made for corporeal creatures, and these first inhabitants of this earth were the sons of God. So they came here, they shouted for joy when they saw God making the earth, because they knew this was going to be their home. They came and they built some very wonderful, technologically advanced worlds that, the kind of which we cannot even begin to imagine today. I visualize that since not all the sons of God turned to evil, just like all the angels did not turn to evil, that some of these sons of God continue unto this day. They were created way back, even before the earth was created, because they are immortals, and they exist even in some worlds that exist somewhere perhaps in another dimension, or perhaps even somewhere on the earth itself. Areas that we don't have access to, that we are not aware of. But anyway, that is another entire subject entirely altogether. So let's leave it aside for now. Ages 2 to 4 are the ages of evil. Okay. Now, from this, we are going to enter into the age of eternity, in which there is going to be no evil, but the age that follows, the age of creation, in which God, finished the cosmos and filled it up with all these living creatures, and then started this evil as God planned that it would at some point in time. So age 2 can be called the age of the evil angels, or we can call it the silver age. And the chief entity of this, or chief evil entity in this age, was the anointed cherub, whose story is written in the Bible in Ezekiel chapter 28. Age 3 is the age of the evil corporeal, creatures of flesh, called the sons of God in the Bible. This can be called the Bronze Age. And the chief evildoer of this race was Lucifer, whose story we read in Isaiah 14. But as an aside, I did a video more than one perhaps. I don't even know how many, because I got 400 or 500 videos now, so I don't even remember all of them, on the difference between the anointed cherub and between Lucifer, between Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14, to prove that in nowhere does the Bible teach that Lucifer was an angel. It actually clearly calls him a man, because he was a corporeal creature of flesh. The age 4 is the age of the reptilian serpent dragons, and we can call this the Iron Age. And its chief is Satan, who is called by Jesus a murderer from the beginning in John 8:44. So like that dragon that I told you about, Glaurung from Tolkien's mythology, who was created as a weapon just to destroy. The thief comes not but to steal and to kill and to destroy. That is Satan, because he began like that. He's a dragon that was created for this very purpose. And again, as I've explained in this, he may have a consciousness, he may be aware, he may understand, but he is purely evil. He is pure darkness. He is called the Prince of Darkness, the Chief of Darkness, whatever, evil. That's all he is. And this age, prior to this age that follows these ages of evil, is the age of man, which begins with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, which we read about from Genesis chapter 2 onwards, okay? In this age, this is also an extension of the Iron Age, because the chief evildoer of this age is still Satan. And Satan's story is still continuing. Although I believe at the end of the last age, the Bronze Age and going into the beginning of the Iron Age, God did judge Satan, that his kingdoms and his worlds that existed on this earth were destroyed, because this earth was never created for these Naga serpent people. It was created for man in the end. And man was going to be given this earth. And before he could be given that earth, those worlds that existed, whose ruins exist on this earth until this day, like those temples that were built, some of them which I showed you, and other megalithic structures. These have not been built by the race of man, beginning with Adam and Eve. Okay, no. These existed in the age prior, which was built by these serpentine people, by these sons of God, by the giants and other big creatures that existed in those days. They built those races. They built those places and those structures, and God has left them on this earth, although so many of them were melted in that judgment. They literally turned to, like, you can see the evidence of this melting right across the world, in the mountains, in the deserts, in the seashores. It is everywhere, inside the sea, everywhere. But he has left enough of these structures around for us to understand that there is a history of creation that goes far further back than just 6,000 years. That history does not begin with Adam and Eve in the garden. We are very late arrivals. The majority of the history of creation predates us by millions, possibly billions of years. We have no idea how long, okay? But it is very, very long. He destroyed that world completely with the flood, which is the flood of Satan. And, like I said, there is no association of a flood with Lucifer. However, with Satan there is, because in Revelation 12, it tells us the serpent cast out water out of his mouth like a flood, okay? So this flood that existed in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, that destroyed the world that then existed, which we read about in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 7, was the world of Satan. It was not the world of Lucifer. Lucifer had already been cast out. And after some point in time after that, Satan takes over, begins to build all these temples all over, these serpent temples, wherever you go, up on the earth, inside the earth, under the waters, everywhere, everywhere. And that evidence is so much on this earth that that is the only explanation that fits. So then when he is destroyed, he himself is, probably continues to exist now, which God allowed him to exist as a disembodied spirit. That those lost inhabitants that were in that world before this judgment of Satan came, they have now allowed to continue and exist as in disembodied form as evil spirits. They are still around because God is still using them for his purposes. It is quite possible that inside this very earth, these Naga, serpent people, and other creatures, even in corporeal form, still continue to exist. Because when the flood came, it destroyed everything that was on the surface, but there are worlds inside. Like I said, the earth is like a building with stories, and some of these stories were not destroyed by the flood. And that again served God's purposes. Hell, for example, was not destroyed because we know it's still there. But hell was not made in the time of Adam. It has existed a long time before then. The bottomless pit, all these places have continued to exist over the ages. So this is the correct piecing together of the ages of creation. The age of evil can be divided into the Silver Age, which was the age of the angels and of the sons of God. After that came the Bronze Age, the second age of evil, which would be the age of Luciferians and the Serpentine Naga people, led by Satan. And then after that world had been destroyed, Adam and Eve had been made, and this world was given to Adam, who handed it back to Satan. This is the Iron Age. That's the correct chronology of creation. which I have pieced together, and I would like to correct that the flood that came prior to the time of Adam was not the flood of Lucifer, it was the flood of Satan. One of the best ways of learning scripture is by teaching. So as I am, doing this study and I'm teaching, I'm learning myself. And this history of creation of the past, it can be pieced together. Like I said, we cannot ever in this life anyhow find out all the details. For one thing, I mean, so much history happened in the past that we would not, our lifetime would not be enough to even begin to understand a little bit of it. So what we can piece together is these major divisions, the major characters that have played a role in bringing evil, birthing evil, and then making it grow. And, we can understand at least, get a big picture, but not the exact details about it. Okay, so I think this is what happened, and this idea about, which I found very, very intriguing about this serpent worship and these temples that exist right now. We are told that the anointed cherub had built sanctuaries and stuff, which I'm sure were not sanctuaries or temples which were dedicated to serpents. So those things were destroyed a very, very long time ago. And on the ruins of that, this earth actually has ruins, okay, going right down to hell. And if a person had the ability to dig down, you would find ruins. So there's layer upon layer upon layer. And that just goes to show like how old the history is. And now the last one is, of course, it was the age of Satan after Lucifer had been cast down and he had been locked up in the bottomless pit, like the angels had been before him. Then it is that the Satan, creatures, he set up his kingdom on here. And what did he do? He built all these temples. That's why so many temples exist, and they're all filled with the serpent imagery. Serpent is everywhere in mythology. It's like so common, especially when you go to a country like India and stuff like that, and Cambodia, whatever, in Asia, Africa, you see the serpent everywhere. And that is because the last age, before the age Adam, is really before Adam was made, was primarily the age of these serpent creatures, not of the sons of God, man-like beings, or that of the angels. All right, so I'll just stop here and, invite anybody that might have something to add to this, or if you have any questions, please go right ahead. Yes, Jessica.
Good afternoon, Paul. I must say that was really interesting. When you said this isn't the flood of Lucifer, I went, oh no. I thought, wait, because it took ages for me to understand the flood of Lucifer. But while you were speaking, I looked at Isaiah, and you're right, it doesn't mention a flood, does it?
No.
All the damage that Lucifer did does not mention a flood, only when you speak about the firmament. That's where So can I ask you, please, just to give me a quick recap again of where the flood came from Satan?
Well, the flood does not necessarily come from Satan. It came from God. Basically,
sorry.
Sorry?
The story. Sorry. Not the story of Satan's, the flood thing. I know it kept, I understand. Sorry. Yes, carry on. Sorry.
Well, the flood is mentioned in Genesis 1:2, right, where it tells us that, the earth was without form and void, and the darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the water. So that Genesis 1:2 tells us that the earth existed before the creation of Adam in a state of a ruined wasteland covered with water. So obviously there was this flood, and this flood obviously was not just limited to the earth as it was in the days of Noah. It had also reached up into the heavens, because that is confirmed in Jeremiah chapter 4 in verses 23 to 26, where it tells us that the heavens had no light, and that was not true in the days of Noah. So this flood was much more extensive,
And when we begin to look back and see, the evil, the worlds that existed, I mean, the history of this earth primarily, and even into the heavens, because in Job we can read that the heavens are not clean in his sight, that, the angels spread their evil, these evil angels spread evil in the heavens, so the heavens were unclean, and they had to be destroyed. And then the earth, or the worlds that they build on here, these evil creatures that took over, just like in this day today, once in this age today, when Adam handed over this world to Satan, basically, it has been evil since that time, and evil worlds have been built upon it, and evil things have been done upon it. That's why God is going to do away with it. And these things happened in the past, but of course on a much, much greater scale. So in 2 Peter chapter 3, we read about the heavens which are now, which tells us that there were other heavens other than the ones that exist today. So the story of the flood primarily is in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. So between Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 and verse 2, there is this whole history, which is the history of first the creation, and then the history of the origins, of the birth of evil and all these ages that went by. So there's so much history in there, but what we do know is that there were three main characters of evil, let's say, that are recorded, whose story is recorded in the Bible, in Ezekiel 28 of the angelic races, in Isaiah 14 of the sons of God, and these who's Lucifer being the main character in that story. And then finally Satan, whose story is kind of scattered throughout scripture, and we have to sort of piece it together. So since we know that the angels were locked away in hell, and since we know that Lucifer cast down into the pit, then it makes sense. The only one that is still around is Satan. Then it makes sense that the judgment of the world at the end of the last stage would be judgment upon the world whose chief evildoer or evil ruler was Satan. That's how I see it. So I hope that makes sense. And that's why this flood that came, it came sometime after Lucifer had already, fallen, and it failed in his attempt to go up into heaven, and he had been thrown down. He said, you'll be thrown down to the earth. So he came back down here, and then he was locked away just like the angels were. And then who did that leave? Then, of course, it left Satan. And Satan then took over, and then that evidence that he did take over, and he, set himself as the God of that world, as he is the God of this world. And then they built all these shrines to him, and a lot of them are still left standing up to today, especially in Asia and in India and Cambodia and all that, and even in China and places like that. And that is evidence left for us by God that he didn't annihilate that completely, so that we can come to this understanding that this is that his word confirms the evidence that we see with our eyes upon this earth.
I absolutely see it. I mean, at first, like I say, I did struggle, but then I know to hear you out, check what you're saying, and yes, it does now make sense to me. I will go over that video again, possibly a few more times, to make sure that it does sink.
Yes, the information is like I said.
So.
Sorry, please continue.
No, you go, please.
No, I was just saying, that this history is so vast, spread out over such a long periods of time, and the events in it are naturally so. And in Bible, we don't really need to. Yes, it does. I have a great deal of interest in learning as much about it as possible, and that's just the information that in my life I have come across, as far as, for example, coming from being born and raised in a country like India, where there's a lot of mythology which is still, looked upon as history. And with all these creatures and these gods are very real for people there. And then, having had an interest in science fiction and fantasy literature, such as that of Tolkien, it has now allowed me to see that, yes, there is truth. All lies are based on truth. So even though mythology does not give us the true history. There are enough truths in it that we can, piece together the truth of what actually might have happened. Okay. And that, yes, I have been, let's say, a gift or whatever, that I had this knowledge come my way in my younger years. And now I can look back and, like on the works of Tolkien, for example, and the history that is recorded in there, which very, very few people know about. And it makes complete sense. And that's when, one of those major stories of his is the creation of this dragon race. And, Jesus, when he said in John 8:44, that's, he was a murderer from the beginning. I mean, it is impossible that God would create somebody as a murderer right from the beginning. Okay. And therefore, there had to be another way in which, he came into existence. And that makes sense to me that, yes, we talk about us, we have talked a lot about the image of God, that, that's what we are, the meaning of the image of God is to be transformed into the person of God, that is to acquire his mind and his heart. And in that sense, Satan is really the image of the angelic, of the anointed cherub, of the evil angels, and also the image of these evil sons of God. Okay, so that's who he is. That just like the person of God is downloaded into us, as we begin to understand and be transformed into God, into that God person. That's what happened to Satan. That's how he came into existence. That person that these evil creatures was imprinted in him, and how it's been done. And I don't know. I really don't understand. I mean, I don't know the methodology, but that is exactly what happens. So Satan is, he is basically the evil of these angels and also of the sons of God combined. That's who he is. And it is like, that's all is in him, is that evil. And his story, that, what really shocks me is the sheer extent of these worlds that existed, the size of them and the dimensions of them, because it is like literally, all over the earth, you can find evidence of this here, of these ruins. Either they're in ruin state and some of these like buildings are still standing. And, like just the fact that they can stand for like thousands and thousands of years, that in itself is, a marvel that they were built in such a way that, we can't even do that today. But also the fact that they were actually built with stone when, technology advances, we don't use those kind of, building materials anymore. Like, here in Canada, basically how houses are made out of, some kind of plywood and cardboard and stuff like that. Literally, they are, and they don't last very long. They're not going to stand for thousands of years. They hardly stand for 50 years. And so, the reason why all these worlds are believed, like the one just prior to the world of our present world, the last one that was judged and destroyed in Genesis 1:2, it was built with stone because previous to that, prior to that time, they had so much warfare and so many other events that had occurred that basically, they had destroyed almost everything. And therefore, to make anything last, they had started these building in these stones, and, all this kind of material was being used rather than metal and glass like we do today. So these are just, hypothetical or speculations that, because I think about these things and, this is how I kind of visualize it happened. Now, it may not have happened exactly as I'm saying it, but, something like that did happen in the past. All right. So I hope that, you're not
Sorry,
going.
Paul.
Yes, please.
Sorry, I did have one more. You mentioned in one of your emails about Nimrod. You didn't think that Nimrod built anything. And I found that interesting because I remember, some sort of recreation video a long while back. And they were calling or referencing the gap theory as, what was it? Ruin reconstruction theory. And I thought to myself, now look at that. It's just taking the words and twisting, ruin reconstruction. I mean, yeah, it sort of makes you laugh. But then I do pity people that fall for it, you know, and they're not willing to sit and listen to somebody like you or spend the time to learn. You know, none of us are angels. We all get distracted. We all lose our way. But, you know, at the end of the day, there is only one place the truth is coming from, you know. And I do thank you very much for your teachings. Oh, I mean, we are blessed here, definitely. Thank you.
Because so many, you know, it's normal, right? I mean, in any city, in any town, in Europe, for example, a lot of these old, if you go back a few hundred years ago, you know, like they had buildings from a few hundred years before that. So a lot of them are repurposed. They are, you know, renovated and reused, and all that happens all the time. So in these worlds that came before, you know, I'm sure, like, since this earth itself has not been completely burnt up, then a lot of those ruins and a lot of those, even like those after the war, for example, like in Europe, a lot of those buildings that might have been bombed, they were still renovated and rebuilt. So that also happened after these judgments that came upon it, like in Cain's case, when he went in and into the land of Nod and he built a city there. You know, I mean, the way I see it is, first of all, you know, it was probably not that there were thousands and tens of thousands of people that they would need to build a city. So it makes more sense that, you know, these cities were left over from the age before, and you know, people like Cain found it and they started to rebuild. So there is a truth in these people that teach about this rebuilding and stuff like that, except they don't put all the pieces together, and they don't attribute it to the Bible and to, you know, the history that is recorded in it. And then they start to look for all these other weird explanations, and none of them make sense. And that's also with Nimrod, you know, like when they came after the flood, Babel itself, I believe, was either like a city left over from the days of Noah before the flood, because the earth was very, you know, in the time of the flood, by the time the flood came, these people, you know, they were all over the earth, okay? They weren't just a few thousand or something like, you know, we visualize when you think of the days of Noah. They were literally millions and possibly billions of people that were living on the earth, and they had some very major cities and you know, very sophisticated technologies that they were using in those days. And so after the flood, when these people came and they found Babel, I believe, was one of these cities from before the flood, which might have been built sometime in the days of Noah, you know, before the flood, but after the creation of Adam. Or they could have also been a city that went back to the days of this Satan/Lucifer, because one of the interesting ideas, one of the interesting pictures we have in there is of this tower, you know, which they said the top to reach into heaven, which kind of reminded me of Lucifer's story, you know, that he was trying to ascend up into heaven. And, you know, I kind of thought to myself, you know, was this Babel, this place? Because Babylon itself, there have been more than one, okay, that existed, not just in modern times, but going back to the ages before Adam. So this, I said, you know, was this from Babylon? Was this Lucifer's kingdom or something, where he wanted to, which was the place, the tower that he was going to use to try and ascend up into heaven, whatever that tower might have been. And this is something that Nimrod and his people that were with him were trying to rebuild. Who knows? You know, I can't say for sure, but I think that is a more logical explanation, that they found these places and they were going to rebuild them, to, you know, to repair them, essentially, not to start building it from scratch. Because, you know, they didn't need to go into they could have started building it. They said that they were coming from the east, they were moving, okay? And the purpose of that moving, if they were just going to build something from scratch, they could have built it right where they landed after the flood, right? So they were moving and they were traveling. And I believe one of the reasons they were traveling was because they knew that some of these places, you know, from the old times would still have probably survived, and they might have been looking for them. And when they found Babel, that's what they started to do. Let's repair this and let's build the city again and let's build this tower again. and start doing all the evil that was going on before the flood. And, God came and put an end to that. So, there's very interesting history in the Bible. Is so interesting that, it's like, solving a mystery and putting together a jigsaw puzzle. And when we start thinking about it, I mean, you could just continue on and on and on and on. And, I'm so glad that more and more pieces, they fall into place. Like I said, could take decades. I mean, I've been at this for over 30 years now. And even now, I think I barely started to scratch the surface. Okay, in that case, I originally intended to do this as a study on Genesis. But then, just in those 2 verses of scripture, 1 and 2, there's like so much history that's buried in it that this is already the 3rd meeting on this topic. And, we could probably continue on. So we'll see what tomorrow will probably continue on from verse 3 onwards. But have a blessed day in our Lord Jesus Christ. Think about these things. And that's what meditation is, like you think about these things, your mind God gave us. It is for the process of, for the purpose of processing information in it, which is called thinking. And, so we think about silly things all the time, which really don't have any value except to just waste our time on meaningless subjects. So, if you think about the Word of God and how it really is more interesting, if that's the right word, than anything else we can think about. And there's so much information in it that we could really be thinking about it 24 hours a day for the rest of our time or the rest of our days in this body, and we could hardly begin to understand even like 1% of what is written in the Word of God. And that proves that it has to be the Word of God, because there's so much in it that we can barely, like I said, scratch the surface in this lifetime. All right, so have a great day and a blessed day, and let's, we'll continue our studies tomorrow.
Hungry and thirsty, our souls faint within. like